Welcome to the, honestly, I didn't know I was facilitating this, so can staff help me out? I had no idea.
Sure. We haven't had a work session in several years where it's just
Yeah,
been the planning commission. But in general,
right.
the chair will open the meeting and just welcome everybody. And then pass it to staff and staff will introduce the item. So we could just skip the formalities today. And I'll just let you know that we have about 25 minutes today. We want to finish up by 6:55 so that we can transition to our other meeting for the evening. And for those of you that didn't hear, our new commissioner, Brendan Keneally, is that right? Right. Is here tonight. We'll introduce him more officially at the next meeting as well. But tonight we're going to talk about home occupation regulations. This came up in response to some complaints last year about a community supported agriculture business that was operating in our low density single family home or districts. And as we started to look into that particular issue, COVID hit and we started having everybody working from home and doing lots of different activities at their home, and all their neighbors are watching. And we started getting a lot of complaints. A lot of complaints about neighbors just not liking what their neighbors are doing in general. So it's been a very busy season for code enforcement and Nellie, but we decided we'd look at the home occupation rules a little bit more comprehensively. So we're going to touch on the agricultural things, but we're also going to talk just more broadly about the regulations. So I'm going to let Nellie walk you through this. And then just as a reminder with work sessions, we're not looking for you to make a decision tonight. What we're looking for is just your general feedback. Are we on the right track? That kind of thing, not a decision. Okay. All right, Nellie.
And remember, everyone, to mute yourself. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah. Like Melissa said, we have some smaller edits, mostly to clarify the rules because it's been, people are at home in the pandemic and it's come up a lot of times since I've been here. So let's see if I can present this very quick set of slides. And there, hopefully. There we go. So, I wonder if you can still see it can everyone see that? Okay. Oh, except for now I'll block it. Oh, technology. So in the memo that I sent out, there's on the top section, there's a summary of the proposed changes. And on the bottom, it shows all the changes, and hopefully it showed up for you in red. Most of those changes are just little clarifications here and there about things that have popped up that I've seen that I've had calls about or talked to residents about. But the biggest changes are about gardening, and we've had somebody recently who was trying to maybe run a business that involved a lot of growing produce, which in Richfield, you can have community gardens anywhere at industrial sites, institutional sites. So schools, churches, parks, places of worship. We don't prohibit gardening in the city. We don't prohibit market gardening, which would be like gardening for the intent of selling it. And we don't prohibit selling produce at those institutional sites, but we do prohibit, through the home occupation rules, we prohibit the selling of goods from homes. So this last year, we interpreted that to include produce. So nearby cities, can everyone still see these slides? I hope they're working. Okay. Nearby cities are very similar to Ridgefield. Minneapolis is kind of the biggest, most allowed city. So they have market gardens are allowed anywhere in the city as a primary use, even on residential sites. So I have a community garden. Actually, I'm in Minneapolis, and there's one down the street from me, and it's the only garden on the lot, and it's residential, and it's allowed. And you can sell that produce from those sites as well if you have a market stand. Other cities like St. Louis Park, and I think there's a few more on the next slide, they permit all gardening, all horticulture, but no selling from the home if it's a residential site. In Bloomington, they do have community gardens, but they're limited to 3 families in residential areas. And a couple other cities that I did look at. Next page. So Edina permits garden structures. Egan allows gardening as an accessory use, but all of these cities mostly prohibit the sale from the property. Hopkins was interesting because they completely prohibited all home occupations. So where am I? So based on these nearby cities and what we've seen in Ridgefield this last pandemic time, our goals in editing making amendments to the home occupation rules are mostly around clarifying that agricultural or beekeeping activities, which are already permitted, are exempt from the fully enclosed building rule. So usually home occupations have to be inside, but we wanted to allow outside growing of food or flowers. We wanted to prohibit the sale of produce from the home by adding under subdivision 11, we would add item J, and item I already prohibits sale of honey from the home. And we would also propose no changes to the community garden rule at institutional sites, and would continue to allow the distribution of produce from those sites. So those are the proposed changes. And then again, the memo has all of them sort of laid out, and all the edits in red for each subdivision. So if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them, or Melissa can help me too.
Nope, I think Nellie did a good job. I would just say that in general, our purpose in reviewing these rules is to, understand and give folks flexibility. A lot of people are moving home and they're doing more business from their house, and that can be a variety of things. And we want people to have a way to make a living and to provide food potentially for their neighbors, other things like this. We think those are all good things. But these are happening in residential neighborhoods. And so we think having some reasonable limitations on how those operate and how your neighbors might see and have to deal with some of those externalities of those businesses, it's good to regulate some of those. So yep, Nellie's had a lot of these over the past year. So yep, Peter?
Just so it seems like we're basically changing or amending the code to basically say that it's okay to have like a garden in your backyard rather than an enclosed structure. But you can't really sell that produce from your home or flowers from your home, but it's okay to grow it there in an outside environment, right? I don't see that being a huge burden on any neighbor or any type of, I don't see that being a problem at all. And you said bees. We've always allowed bees in Richfield, or is this a change?
I think a couple years ago there was an amendment to allow beekeeping. So like apiary little, beehives, but there is still a prohibition on selling the honey
Right.
from the home.
Okay, because I mean, I would say that, when you kind of think about what's what's the impact on the neighbor. I mean, if someone's got a garden in their backyard, it's probably not going to impact you much. Bees, you could argue that that's maybe could have some intrusive impacts on a neighbor's backyard barbecue or use of their patio. But that's already in the code. That's not something we're adding or discussing adding. It's already allowed.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. And just to be clear, the rules about beekeeping are actually administered and part of the city code. They're
Yeah.
administered by environmental health.
Okay.
So all we're doing here is clarifying the business aspect of it.
Yeah, and basically saying they don't need to be indoor either, and which I wouldn't expect that they would be either. Okay, thank you.
Catherine, you should feel free to run this meeting. I know we weren't sure how these went, but it's
Okay, I
probably
will.
more comfortable for you to do it.
Okay. All right, and next time I'll be prepared. Yeah, I've never done a work session with just us, I guess. I had a question about how will this, you were talked about the complaints you've received in the past. How is this going to help those scenarios? And also, secondly, Melissa, you said you want to help people make a living at home, but they would make a living at home basically doing just gardens that they would sell the produce of somewhere else. Is that it in a nutshell? And I saw you said only one full-time employee, which seems reasonable.
Yes, so a lot of the smaller edits that aren't related to growing food or plants, those are mostly clarifications. So for example, I had somebody that was running a business out of a home that they weren't actually living in. So just to clarify, you have to be living there full time. I've had people like have big trucks as part of a business that they're parking at their residence, and they don't have a label or like a business name on them, so they're not marked as part of the business, but they're still used every day with the business.
So would they still be able to have a big truck if it's labeled? How big of a truck, or is that?
One, if it's labeled, if it's used for the business, they can have one. I think it says automobile car, identified. Currently it says identified, but the proposed change is used.
So the size it wouldn't be a huge truck. That's what I'm saying. Is that right?
I believe the city code has size limits on trucks.
Okay.
So either
All
way,
right.
it would have to.
I'm going to move along because we're out of run. Commissioner Sturza, and then after that, Commissioner Keneally, and then Commissioner Rudolph. Go ahead.
I guess on first blush, I don't initially see the problems with people selling their produce from their home. And I'm wondering to see why that exchange of goods is different than the permitted exchanges of goods. Like what makes purchase or like selling produce different, that it should be more strictly regulated than the other permitted uses?
Currently, the sale of any goods from your home is prohibited. I don't have the language in front of me, of course, unless it's like a very rare thing or happens like if you have a hair salon and you happen to sell shampoo also. So generally, the sale of all goods would be prohibited out of your home.
Then to clarify, like, why is it okay to permit services but not the sale of goods?
I think the intent, Melissa can chime in, but the intent is traffic. I think the intent is to keep this area is going to be residential, so we don't need like commercial traffic, human traffic, auto traffic. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
Well, this rule was in place when I started in Richfield. I think the idea has always been that retail sales would generate more traffic than occasional service. And as Nellie stated, it does allow for kind of one-off retail sales when it's part of something else, but continuous retail sales have always been prohibited. And I do believe it's related to traffic and the consistency of that traffic.
I support all of the changes, except I question whether we need to be so restrictive on the sale of produce. But that's just my 2 cents.
I will follow
Melissa?
that up with, if you would relax the prohibition to allow the sale of produce, I think that anybody who does any other retail kind of sales could then argue that you're treating them unfairly, that it's arbitrary and capricious, which a zoning code can't be. You really have to look at it across the board. Are retail sales in general appropriate here? And we didn't think that they were. The city council and the planning commission can certainly advise us to change it to allow retail sales.
No, it's
Commissioner Keneally? Oh, go ahead. Commissioner Sturza, go ahead.
I guess we're not singling out any other sales of goods of any other thing. So I hear what you're saying, and obviously it's a residential neighborhood, it's zoned residential for a reason. Like, it's not a commercial district or a business district. I just don't understand why we're singling out produce and flowers as opposed to all the other things that you could sell. And maybe I'm missing something. I think in this environment where we talk about wanting to support sustainability, it seems counterintuitive to say, let's put more regulation on being able to purchase my produce close to home, is how this is hitting me. And I don't mean to monopolize our short work session, but that's just where I'm coming from.
Can we go on to the other commissioners and then staff reply, because we're running out of time? Commissioner Keneally?
Thank you. My question was similar to Brett's, or Commissioner Sturza, excuse me, about why we were restricting sales from homes. If we're justifying it on a basis of traffic, I'm concerned that we've had an uptick of residential traffic in the last year due to grocery deliveries and UPS deliveries and Amazon deliveries and all of those things. So I would like to see a different justification personally.
Commissioner Rudolph?
So there was a mention of vehicles with business vehicles being in at homes. I know, for a fact, there's a lot of people that drive business vehicles for work, and they bring them home, whether it's police officers or roofing companies or, things like that, and if both you've got a couple, that maybe more than one is in that business, if they would, based on these proposed changes, if more than one was there, would that be illegal?
If you are running your business from your home, so say a repair business, I don't know, and you have 2 cars that you use, both of them for your business out of your home, the proposed changes would make it so you'd have to store one of those cars in the garage, or they shouldn't be stored out if they're part of the business.
Okay.
Commissioner Lavin?
I just wanted to respond to, I don't think this is intended, this is to single out produce or honey from being distributed from the residential properties. I think it's just pushing it in line with our normal code, which doesn't allow that because of, the natural buffer you want between commercial small business and your residential areas. It wouldn't be desirable to have substantial traffic coming to a singular family home in a residential neighborhood for business uses. So I wouldn't look at it as we're singling out produce or honey or whatever the case may be. It's just making sure that that's in line now that we've expanded it to be not in buildings, but so much in the open or whatever. But it's just reinforcing the fact that you don't want that in your single family neighborhoods.
Commissioner Rosenberg, did you want to chime in or no? Okay. This is Chair Quam. My thoughts, since we're sharing our opinion, is to introduce changes in small ways, because enforcement is so expensive and so hard that once there are problems, I've lived between people that had a whole bunch of chickens, and on the other side, they're doing car repairs all enforcement is really hard and really expensive. So that's something I always think is good to consider up front. And then, you know, we can make incremental change and see how it goes too. Anybody else? And Melissa, do you want to follow up on, yeah, Melissa?
I did just want to say, I understand why it feels like we're calling them out specifically. We're putting them in there as a clause when we haven't put any other specific use in the clause. Everybody else, we've just made fall under retail. So alternatively, if it feels better, we could modify subsection 10 for retail sales and just put in parentheses that it includes the retail sales of produce. I think the idea was that this particular use came up, and some people reading the code did not agree that produce was covered. So we were specifically putting it in to say it is a retail use covered by these other things. So I can understand why it feels like, because it's a separate clause, it's called out as something other than just retail sales. We could organize it differently.
Personally, I think that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, I still personally support that I should be able to purchase vegetables from a neighbor who's growing them. But if that is not on the table, it certainly makes sense not to single them out as a good that is any different than any other type of goods that are being sold or could be sold in the city.
Yep, that's a good point. We can certainly reorganize.
This is Chair Kwan, what would the next step be then with this, after this work session? You're gonna edit it a bit, and then do you propose it to the Planning Commission later?
Yes, so we'll take back your feedback from this meeting, make some edits. It'll come before you for a public hearing. And we hope to bring that forward in March so that anyone who is hoping to run or have a market garden this year will have some clarity on what is allowed for the growing season. So we would bring it to the Planning Commission in March, and then it would go before the City Council in April.
Commissioner Sursa?
And in that process, will you be engaging the people who have complained and the people who have been the recipients of complaints to let them know that this is on the agenda? So if they wanted to provide public comment, that they could. Is that part of the process?
It generally is not, that we don't specifically reach out. We publish it, that the public hearing is happening. This particular grower is following this issue, as are some council members. So that person will be notified, yes.
Okay, it just makes, if there's a specific situation that this is trying to address, I certainly hope we include those residents in the conversation, because that just makes sense.
Yep.
Any last thoughts?
Just a quick question. Are there any more of these occupational things on the horizon that you've heard about, Nellie? Maybe that, I mean, this is kind of specific to gardening and well, gardening, but is there anything else that's kind of starting to eke into some of the comments maybe that you've heard from the public?
I haven't heard much. I mean, I'm not sure if things will change with people moving their business to their homes as the pandemic goes on further.
Mhm.
I haven't heard much. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
All right,
I-
Melissa?
Yep, I just want to say the home occupations that we get the most complaints are that people are fixing vehicles from their home, and also that they are running landscaping businesses, or that they're roofers, or that they plow, or that they have these large vehicles that they sometimes get running very early in the morning, that they're changing out equipment in the middle of the night or very early in the morning, that can disturb their neighbors. And then right now, just with everybody home, everybody's watching every single thing that you're doing outside. And so we get complaints that don't go anywhere, but yeah, everybody's just looking out their windows.
All right, should we close this part so we can all log in to the other meeting? It's a different link.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So good night. See you in a few minutes at the regular meeting.